So let's take a look at 1923, a disastrous year for the Weimar Republic. You've had the early problems that they have, the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the Spartacist uprising, the Freikorps uprising, and the weaknesses of its own constitution. Now we arrive in 1923, where a series of events lead to hyperinflation. So what happens is Germany can't afford to pay the reparations to the Allies at the end in 1922. The reparations outlined as part of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany can't afford to pay in 1922. So what France do is they decide, well, we're going to march into the Ruhr, an industrial area of Germany, and we're going to take what we need from Germany in resources. So we're going to take the equivalent payment in resources, an area called the Ruhr, an industrial area in the Rhineland in January of 1923. France go in and they say, right, what we're going to do is just take your raw materials, and that's how we'll take the payments this year. What this means is the German government also try and just simply print more money in order to pay off the French, in order to pay their debt to the French. So how did the Weimar government react? The Weimar government encouraged the workers in the Ruhr to use passive resistance and go on strike. Passive resistance as in just sort of don't do what the French ask you. Don't actively fight against them, but just don't do what they say, and go on strike. Because, the government's weak, they don't have an army, they can't offer any armed resistance. What that means then is the government have to print more money to pay the workers and to cover the increasing inflation. Strikes meant less food was produced, so food prices go up. So the government has to print more money, so food prices go up, so they have to print more money, and so on and so forth. A strike meant refusing to work for the army of the foreign occupation. Obviously, what that means is the German government keeps printing more and more money, but that means that money itself, the value of it goes down. So the cost of goods goes up continually and continually. So they have to print more money, and it just continues like that. So some of the workers in the Ruhr take more direct action, such as arson and sabotage of industrial equipment in the mines. So they would flood and they can't be worked. A number of strikers are even shot in armed altercations with the French troops. What are the effects of the invasion? Now, what's important to understand here is the best answers about hyperinflation in 1923 will talk about both the winners, because whilst it sounds like a terrible thing for everyone, there are some winners out of this, and also talking about who loses out as a result of hyperinflation. So what are the effects of the invasion? Well, one, it gives the German people a common enemy in the French, doesn't it? It united the German people against the French invaders. The strikers in the Ruhr were seen as the heroes of the German people. And now here's the important thing. The popularity of the Weimar Republic temporarily increased due to supporting the strikers and organising passive resistance. So now this is important because January 1923, when the invasion and the occupation of the Ruhr initially happens, when the Weimar government, show some backbone and stand up to the French, the German people think that's good. They're finally standing up for themselves, having signed the treaty before and surrendered before. They think finally they're standing up for themselves, and the popularity of the Weimar government increases as a result of standing up for the French. However, as you can imagine, as the economic problems start to sink in of hyperinflation and the Weimar government's response to it, this support will start to dwindle. So, however, it is disastrous for the German economy. The government, as I've said, have to print more money to pay the strikers, increasing inflation. The strike meant fewer goods were produced, making inflation even worse because fewer products in circulation makes prices rise. So, in summary, initially, it boosts the popularity of the Weimar government because they stand up to the French. However, as their mismanagement of the crisis continues in terms of printing more money, this support dwindles. So, who wins as a result of hyperinflation? Well, homeowners, because they can pay off their mortgages quicker. If you have a mortgage of 2 million marks or whatever, now that 2 million marks is, almost worthless. So all that debt that you have, you can pay off very, very quickly because you're earning that much money in a day, in an hour, in a minute, whatever. So any debt you have can be paid off quickly, so your mortgage can be paid off quickly. Foreigners could exchange little money and therefore afford more goods. If I was renting a property and I had a contract where the value of that property was fixed, I would benefit because my rent doesn't change. However, my wage will have gone up massively, as in, like, I'll be now earning 500,000 marks, whereas before I was earning 5. But my rent price doesn't go up. Exporters also benefited because the products in Germany became cheaper, so then they could take them abroad to sell. Businessmen who had borrowed money could easily pay off debt. Effectively, in summary, anyone with debt benefits because they can pay off these debts quickly. Farmers benefited because there's a rise in the prices of food. We'll see how the farmers' situation changes throughout this course. But as a result of hyperinflation, farmers benefit at this point because food prices go up. And the rich also win because their wealth isn't necessarily found in terms of cash. It's found in property and land which they own. So they're sort of protected themselves. They've sort of protected themselves by owning property. That's where their wealth is tied up. So the fact that value goes up and down doesn't affect their things they own. The losers, however, are the elderly. They're on pensions. The pension amount doesn't change, but the money they are being paid has become worthless. Wages for workers, although they are higher than before, they're still lower than food prices. What you need to understand, or what we need to get into here, is the fact that the food prices are going up and up and up, and then the wages are going up and up and up, but not fast enough to keep up with how fast the prices of goods are going up. So the wages are constantly going up in a desperate attempt to keep up with the spiraling prices of food and other essentials. The middle class lost faith in the Weimar Republic because obviously they had savings, they have money, the middle class, but all those savings have been wiped out because if you've spent your whole life saving up like whatever 50,000 marks, suddenly people are earning 50,000 marks in a day. So your savings have become absolutely worthless. They've been completely wiped out. So 1923, a disastrous year for the Weimar Republic, and obviously what we're talking about there, this hyperinflation, this damage to the reputation of the Weimar Republic, this struggling economy, is what's going to lead one of the reasons why Hitler is going to try and launch the Munich Putsch towards the end of 1923.